Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you come back often. Hope you tell your friends about us so that they can enjoy our shows too. Before we start tonight, I'd like to introduce Father Ron Walters with our evening prayer. Father Walters.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Father Walters, thank you so very much. We appreciate so much all of your help with our shows, both from a modeling standpoint, as well as the prayers that you provide us. Thank you. And now I want to talk about something that is really near and dear to my heart, and that's our new scholarship program. I think it's going pretty well for the amount of time that we've been doing this. In the last 7 days, I understand we've had 164 people come to our scholarship page that we've set up on our website. That page, by the way, is newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship. And out of those people, we've had 23 of them then go to the page where you download the application. We have 2 people that have filed the application so far. And for the amount of time that we've been doing this and talking about it, I'm really encouraged by that. I'm also encouraged by the amount of support that we're getting from the modeling community at large. For example, we have one of the largest model railroad manufacturers in the world, Atlas, that published our information about our scholarship program in what they call their insiders notifications. It's their insider newsletter that goes to people who subscribe to it and people who want to see what's happening at Atlas and what Atlas is doing. I can't thank Atlas enough for showcasing our program. I think it's an indication that the modeling community sees the value of a scholarship for the young modelers coming along. And I hope that other companies will come forward and do that for us too. Atlas, of course, is a member of the Hobby Manufacturers Association. And also they're listed in the information that the National Retail Hobby Stores Association publishes in their annual directory of membership. So from that standpoint, I need to thank both of those associations for also disseminating our information to all of their members. I assume that's how perhaps Atlas got the information in the first place. So for those associations, thank you so very much. And to Atlas, thank you so very much for your support of our program. The figure on the left side is of Earl Hackett at the Timonium show. And Earl, I can't thank you enough for being there and having our banner and so forth. And I understand that Earl feels that he talked to at least 4 young modelers that fit the criteria to apply and that were interested in our scholarship. So we're looking forward to that. We were at Amherst. We had a significant input from people at the Amherst show. And, you know, the O-Scale Central organization has been very supportive. They're going to be publishing an article in their upcoming publication. I understand the NMRA National is publishing an article about us, or the same kind of information that Atlas did, at least. And the regions that I have sent articles to, I expect the NMRA regions to also be promoting our effort. In addition to that, it just seems to me that the amount of interest that we're seeing, the people that are talking back and forth about it, that send me emails that they saw this or they think that's a great idea and this kind of thing, it tells me that we've hit a nerve out there. And I think when Walter started this, that's how I found out about it and even started thinking about maybe it's something that New Tracks should do. When Walters started their scholarship program, I guess 2 years ago now, I think that they were way ahead of the curve on this. I think they saw it. I think they saw the need for it. And now what I think is happening, since we've taken it up and are promoting it to the extent that we are, I think it's going to catch on. I'm happy to tell you that the attorneys now have received the approval from the state of Florida for the nonprofit corporation that we needed in order to start the process with the federal IRS to get the 501c3 designation. So our corporation has been approved by the state. We have implemented all of the requirements. We've had the first board meeting and so forth. The members of the board are myself, Bob Davidson, Phil Edholm, Kevin McCumber, and Jeff Jordan. And I can't thank them enough for doing this. The talent that they have with their knowledge of both running a nonprofit organization, with Jeff being the attorney who offered to pro bono provide us the legal help to get the 501c3 established and get the nonprofit established. We couldn't have done it without him. Kevin and Phil, their knowledge of the business environment and the guidance that they're providing, we couldn't buy that on the market today. No one could. So we're fortunate, we really are. And then we've got all of the people, all of you out there that contributed funding to enable us to be able to pay the fees for the state and the federal government to even apply for these things, to be able to cover our costs to produce these shows, to provide the funding for the $1,000 scholarship. There's just no way that we can say thank you enough to you. I've sent each one of you an email thanking you, but that's not enough either. So we're going to try to figure a way to say more appropriately how much we appreciate your effort. And then we've got all of the people who have appeared on the show, the people that like Phil and Pat who are running the shows today, the people like Jim Allen and Jamie Bothwell who are doing the work for our website, the myriad of volunteers out there that are helping us. You don't get enough credit. You know who you are. I know who you are. We have a team meeting once a month. I can't thank you enough. Dan Dargy. Dan is the one that set up our website for us from a technical standpoint. He's been highly supportive of the scholarship, and he's been highly supportive of everything that New Tracks has tried to do. Martin Breckbilt, MMR, who's the editor of O-Scale Trains magazine, couldn't have been more supportive of what we've been trying to do. So to me, the hobby is behind us. The community is getting behind us. I'd like to see more manufacturers get behind us. We've had a tremendous amount of manufacturers on our show. I'd like to see each one of them come forward and send out something on their email about us and send it to me, and I'll talk about you on the show the same as I'm talking about Atlas tonight. Frankly, Atlas surprised me when I saw it. I had not contacted them directly. So I've got to thank the associations for getting the message to them, because I have been contacting the associations. The NMRA, thank you so very much for your support. We need these kind of things in the hobby. The young modelers coming along need our help. They want to learn our skills. They want to learn our techniques, but they also want to get education, and they don't want to have to pay for it the rest of their lives, the same as they're buying a new car or even a house. So if we can help them, and if we can help them grow in the hobby at the same time, that to me is a win-win situation for everybody. So that's my comments on that. Modeling lifestyle. Our next modeling lifestyle is coming up a week from tomorrow with Dan Rousseau. And I think that this is something that you're really not going to want to miss. We have a short video that we'd like to run for you about this modeling lifestyle show.
Join the modeling lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on February 16th, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Dan Rousseau. Dan is an outstanding modeler and focuses on amazing structures and scenes.
I love the sound of a whistle.
The build-alongs that we have, hope you don't miss any of them. The manufacturers that put them on are we can't thank you enough for wanting to participate on our show, because it gives modelers an opportunity to buy your kits at a discount and learn how to build the model that they buy with the help of the modeler on our show. Again, tonight you're going to hear from Atlantis Models. Peter Petrie, when I talked to him, couldn't have been nicer and more interested in trying to do this. This is the first person, for example, from the Hobby Manufacturers Association who is wanting to do this on our show. And I certainly hope that Peter's not the last one, but I'm looking forward to this, and I can't thank him enough for his participation. Rockin' Farm Toys, that's going to be a different one because it's more of a farming kind of program. But I think that you'll enjoy it, and I think that the kit that is going to be built is something unusual, and that you certainly are going to be interested in. Father Ron is going to talk to you about doing the Inkscape CAD program. Touch Toggles is going to be on with a nice presentation about how to use their products. And then Tom York is going to be on. And, to me, this is something really special for O-Scalers, because Tom is producing a brand new kit, 25 copies of it. It's all he's going to be producing. Your total cost, and this is delivered to your house, is $40 for Tom York's kit. This may be the last one that he ever does, because he's in retirement right now. And he was kind enough to do this for us. And for O-Scalers out there, I can't thank you enough, Tom, for taking the interest in the show and for wanting to do this. The next My Build is coming up February the 15th. This is sponsored by Dan Darty's company, Model Resource LLC. He owns the two magazines that my articles, New Tracks, are published in. And I thank Dan for all of the support that he has given us. So I've got a short video for Dan, and then I'd like to turn this over to Chris Course for a discussion.
Welcome to the world of scale, O and S railroading. We are your resource for all O and S scale modeling. Both our magazines are advertiser supported and free to read online, download as a PDF, or even print. All advertisers are hot linked to their website, so if you see something you like, just click. Please check out our websites for the current issues. All back issues available free for the O-Scale Resource and the S-Scale Resource magazines. And, if you are a manufacturer, distributor, or retail establishment, please contact us through our website for advertising opportunities.
And Chris, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Great, thanks, Jim. All right. Of course, My build is next week, February 15th, 2023. What we would really like to do is encourage those that have never participated before to please send us something. We've got a bunch of entries, but we could always use more. So if you've never been on the show, please send us something. Doesn't have to be the best thing in the world. Could be maybe something you found in a garage sale and you're not quite sure what it is. Maybe you played with it a little bit and need some help. Whatever the deal is, it's no judgment. So anyway, please send us your photos, railrunner130@hotmail.com. And the next show is February 15th, which is next week. So I will turn it back to you, Jim.
That's great. And Craig, Chris, I thank you so much for helping us with the Amherst show. How did it go for you at Amherst? I know you were there selling your stuff. Yeah,
it was really busy on Saturday. I wish my wife had come with me because I needed help. So that was great. We had a great Saturday, and Sunday was pretty slack, but that was actually, excuse me, it actually turned out to be a good thing because like I spent an hour with Bruce Nickerson.
Yeah.
From Seaport Model Works, and that was great. But just spending time with customers and other vendors, and it really gave me an appreciation for choosing to try a business in this area, because even the manufacturers are encouraging of each other, and of course the customers are as well. But yeah, it was pretty neat. It was a great show Saturday, and really the sales slacked off on Sunday. But like I said, it was a good chance to network. So, well, I appreciate you putting me in contact with Brian Bollinger. I talked to him at length today, and Brian has an interesting kit that he and I discussed. It's what he calls his bare bones kits. It's got 4 walls and a roof. And he makes different kinds of kits with 4 walls and a roof. And then the modeler can make it into anything he wants to, but at least he's got those basics. And Brian and I were talking about maybe him doing a build along with that kit and combining it with a My Build later, maybe 2 months later, so that the people buying his kit, however they turn it out, however they use those 4 walls and a roof to finally make whatever kit whatever building or structure they're going to make out of it, if we could then have a separate part on a build along later for those modelers to be able to come and show what they did with his kit. And he seemed to like that idea. So I think that may be something that we may try to do in the future for other manufacturers. But this to me sounded like a kit that is pretty close to scratch building. So for the people who have never scratch built before, this would be a real opportunity. And he'll be on the show for 4 different weeks and talking about using the 4 walls and a roof in certain ways and different ways to build different kind of structures. And so I think that may be interesting. And I really appreciate, Chris, you putting me in contact with him and telling me about him. Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. I was kind of surprised that you two have never made a connection before, but I'm glad you did. So yeah, I am too. I really appreciate it. Well, listen, let's move along to our show tonight. And the first person that I want to introduce is Peter Virgin of Atlantis Models, who is going to be doing the build along of one of his kits, a 1/4-inch scale gasoline truck. And Peter is the first member of the Hobby Manufacturers Associations that's taken me up on my offer to come on our show and do a build along. So Peter, I really do appreciate it. And I hope your experience you can share with other members and maybe encourage them to participate too. So thank you so much.
Can't seem to find Peter. I don't know that he's here.
Okay, then he must be hung up. I'll move on to somebody else and hopefully catch him when he's able to join us tonight. Let me go to Bob Davidson next for his workshop. tips and tricks. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. We'll get right into it here. Welcome to Workshop Tips and Tricks. And my usual introduction about my background, I won't bore you anymore. Tonight's episode is we can all use an extra hand tool. These are toolbox finds of things that I use quite often, and I'll give you just a little bit of an introduction on this. I got big hands, and which just means I wear big gloves, by the way. But and I also have essential tremors, so I shake, which can be a problem when you're modeling an HO scale. So a lot of these you're going to see tonight are things that I found that just help me along and help me keep things from, knocking into each other. So first thing, though, I wanted to kind of back up to last week where we were talking about rulers. I've just started doing some 3D printing and laser cutting and stuff like that, and decided it was time for me to get a digital caliper so I could really do some fine measuring. This one here, I got this on Amazon. It's under 30 bucks. It was 26 bucks. It was very highly rated. I did a bunch of research, and this was rated by several maker sites and modeling sites as the best buy. So it's the Nico stainless steel digital caliper. And what's nice is it does millimeters, inches, or fractions, which is kind of cool. Comes with a spare battery. And as I say, it got very high reviews, 27 bucks. So anyway, these are some, just forceps or tweezers. The one on the left, a lot of these I have been, every time I go to the dentist, I ask him if he's got stuff he's getting rid of. The one on the far left, I got at my dentist shop. The other two were just stuff that I've had. The three on the right, those are ceramic tipped. And as you can see, those are kind of backwards. You squeeze them to open them, and then they hold on to things when you let go. I find these really helpful, and they're really inexpensive. These $12 for the set of three. This is up on Amazon. They're ceramic tipped, so you can use them for soldering, and you can also, they're non-magnetic as it says. So these are, they're pinching coils, but which I have no idea, but they work out great. They really are a great little find that I got on Amazon. So, so that's kind of cool. Hemostats, again, these lock, medical supplies, you can find these all over. I would doubt that your doctors will give you any of them, but they're very inexpensive up on the web. The one on the right is my favorite one. It's the lightest one of all, and that comes from a fly fishing tie kit. I used to do fly fishing, and when I was making my own flies, that was part of the kit that I got. So I'm sure you could find it even at a sporting goods shop or at Cabela's or something like that. Those are just, but they're really handy. You can see there's straight ones and curved ones and all different sizes, and they come in all different lengths. So they're really handy when you have to get into something, even on the layout too, not just for model building. The helping hands, when I'm doing soldering or anything like that, this is just the plain one. I've had this for probably 35 years now. They come with and without the magnifying glass. They're not very expensive. You used to be able to get them at Radio Shack, but you can find them most anywhere. If you're really fancy, there's a bunch of fancy ones out there on the web. This is one that's up. I took the picture off of Amazon. So again, just really helpful to have around to help you get into spaces. These are just some needle nose pliers, longer ones. Again, these are larger units that I use to get into areas, and I use these primarily when I'm working on the layout itself. The bottom one is a compound one. That's actually the one I use. I have a 1961 scooter, a Harley Davidson scooter, and I use that to make carburetor adjustments. But it's just really great to reach into tight areas. A couple other little specialty pliers that I have. We all have cutters and rail cutters and stuff like that. The upper one here This is from Tractor Supply Company. If you have Tractor Supply, they've got a really neat line and they're very inexpensive. And this is a true flush cutter. It basically cuts, leaves nothing there. So, and it's under 10 bucks. These curved things, I just picked this up at a Lowe's and they've proven to be very handy already on a couple of projects. Alligator forceps, again, really handy. I call them platypus, but you can see it's just like a little clamp, but only the very end of the clamp body opens up. Really good to get into tight spaces. Here's one that I had from an exhibit project that I brought home that I use at home. And you can see this is 18 inches long. So I can use this to get way back into stuff to pick something up or if something falls over. It's just a real, and these are available and they're all called alligator forceps. So you should look for those. We all have screwdrivers. I seem to keep going back and forth to this $2 Harbor Freight 4-in-1 screwdriver all the time. And this is probably the best thing I've ever bought at Harbor Freight, which is just a little 6-piece miniature screwdriver set. These are really, I don't know, I'll be honest, these were Craftsman that I got back at Sears probably 30 years ago, 25 years ago. They're just really, stubby side drive screwdrivers. See if you can find these because they really bailed me out sometimes when I've had to get into a tight spot. Mini pry bars are great. You can find them around. Pounce wheels are great for transferring patterns. They're typically, you can get them at the fabric stores or at Hobby Lobby or something like that. 12-inch brass bar clamps. I bought these when I was doing the subway construction. These are just great, fully adjustable, really nice to use and convenient when you're doing larger pieces. You want to have a right angle driver if you're trying to get in, adding in any structure underneath your layout or something like that. This is one that I found again at the Lowe's. It's a flex shaft as well as being a right angle driver. You can remove the handle. And if you're like me and you're kind of dimensionally challenged, having a magnetic pickup tool is very important when you're dropping little things, because I have to pull out the floor pads and all that if I'm going to get down and try to pick something up. So spring-loaded center punch, if you get them, these are great just for marking. If again, to be accurate in drilling holes. There's all different styles and sizes. This is one where you can adjust the force of the punch. So I do recommend that. And then step drills, these are great for drilling into plastic or into light metals. They're not that great for wood because the steps are so shallow. But instead of buying a whole kit of hole saws or something like that, these are very inexpensive alternatives. So I would recommend that you find them if you ever need to put some holes into boxes or anything like that. Mini hacksaw is great. I don't think I have a full-size hacksaw anymore. I just use this down in my workshop. And then the Zona saw, which I got from Micromart, I really like this. It just helps out a lot. It's not as big as some of the larger Japanese saws. You can use this. I use this blade, this third blade, as a flush cut blade, so it works out very nice. So those are just some of the tools. The tool of the week, however, is this little soldering iron kit. I have a whole Weller station that I have on the workbench, but when I was having to go under the layout and do some soldering work, I found this about a year ago. As you see, it's under 25 bucks. You get the accessories, which are worthless, frankly. But this unit really, it heats up in 15 seconds. It's up to temperature. It has adjustable temperature, which is great. And it comes with the tip set that you see there. And I've used it for everything, soldering rail, and it's just so small that I'm able to bring it underneath the layout, and just really been a real time saver, and just so I don't have to drag over the big unit. So tonight's neat website is garrettwade.com. And we'll go to that. And here you can see Garrett Wade. They make all different kinds of tools. But what I'll point you to is their woodworking tools. And they have, in their workshop, they have all different kinds of things, crafting tools, model making tools. They're not the cheapest in the world, but here's some of these precise locking tools that we were just talking about. So you should check them out. It's garrettwade.com. And just some fantastic stuff. Here's some of those clamps, those bar clamps. And I did not buy them from these guys, but it's just good to go through. A lot of these sites, honestly, I find stuff that looks interesting on these sites, and then I go and search for them where I can find them cheaper. So I would suggest, oh, wait a minute, we're going to get 15% off. How do you like that? Anyway, so that's Garrett Wade. That's this week's website of the week. We'll come back here. In 2 weeks, I won't be here next week, but in 2 weeks, we're going to look at useful and small power tools that I use around the shop. So if there's any questions, be happy to answer them, or I can turn it back over to you, Jim.
Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Well, let me tell you something about Bob that you may not know, you may know. Bob is the chairman of our scholarship committee. Bob is the one, for good or bad, you can blame for all of the failures and mistakes and errors and good things that are going on right now for our scholarship, because he's agreed to be the chairman of it. And he brings a tremendous amount of expertise with him. And Bob, what you're doing is just fantastic. I can't thank you enough for taking this chore on and leading us the way that you are.
Well, it's been a pleasure doing it. And as we've discussed, if we don't do it, who's going to? And I just can't stand to see our hobby. I'm also a motorcyclist, and we go through the same thing. I'm a Harley rider, and we're aging out. We need to get younger kids involved. We need to keep regenerating our hobby, and hopefully this is going to help do it.
Well, we sure hope so. And the way the community of modelers is supporting us right now, I couldn't be more pleased. And a lot of it has to go to the leadership that you're providing and the other members of the committee. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So with that said, I'd like now to turn to Bill Banner for his build along of one of his kids. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. All right. So far what we've done is we built the working on Duncan's boots, and we built the internal structure, and we've added the siding, the front, false front bits, siding around the back. We've added the corners and done a little bit of work in the past week. Well, actually, it was done about an hour ago. Covered the shed on the back with a strip wood. It's pre-cut. I've stained the sheet I'm using, but on this sheet here, these are the parts for that. Here's the siding where the door is. This bit here is for this side, and that's the back. So I've already added that. And I've started to add the front decking, and we're going to go ahead and do that now. But before I get to that point, I've also added the sills for these windows, which I did not do last week. So I'm going to cut the rest of these front deck boards off. What I'm going to do, all of these, as you look at the sheet, without too much glare, these are laser cut all the way through, and then there's an etched line along the ends of the boards. So what you can do is you can take a straight edge or just freehand the cut and cut right on through and cut the boards right out. Right? So we'll put some glue on here. I tend to over glue a little bit because these models do get some road use, so they'll travel with me to the different shows. This one probably won't, but I'm just used to putting plenty of glue on so things don't fall apart when they're on the road. So we'll get them on here as quick as we can so we won't have too much silence while I slowly get these things on. Right, there we go. That's got that bit done. Couple pieces left over. So moving along, what we're going to do is put the back wall of the false front on. And I'm going to use my favorite method of putting that on, my spray glue. And I'm just spraying into a trash can. And that'll fit tight on there. You can pull it off a little bit. It's transferred some of the glue and put it back on. I usually do that to get it to stick. Sometimes it sticks really well. It's not perfectly lined up. And just press that home. So what we're going to do next is going to go through putting some of the windows in and how I do it. I don't use plastic windows. All our windows are always laser cut because they're all sort of custom for each kit. So I like making the windows myself. So we're going to do the side windows first. Cut those out. And then we're going to do the sills. And I'm going to cut this piece out here. This is also a door frame for the back. And might as well cut the door out too. In fact, I think it'll just break right off. There we go. All right. Get rid of that. So most of my kits on the windows, I've got a window and I've got a sill. I'll add a little bit of glue for that part, and then the sill itself slips right into the slot. Normally. There we go. So you can see how that works, I hope. Right? That's from the back. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right into the window. So I'm going to add glue all around. And place it in the opening. And the sill itself will fit right in there and sit right on top of the opening. What I normally do is I would put by holding it flat against the bottom, pushing that down, that gets it nice and square. And if you look at it from the inside, well, maybe we will. There's just enough overhang on the inside. There we go. On the inside to hold the window sash when we put that in. So what I'm going to do, hold that a little bit longer. We'll just sit here and watch glue dry for a minute. Hang on. Got a clamp right here. Big clamp, but a clamp. Right, that's doing it. Always takes a little bit more to get these window frames to stick well to clapboard because there's so many voids behind the window when you put it on. So do that one. If you got any questions while I'm sitting here doing this, please shout out. We'll answer it. Right. That one should be on there. Yep, it is. And since I've got this rear door frame ready, I'm going to put it on too. And the door frames are always going to be flush all around the opening, whereas the windows will have overhang to the inside to hold the mullion sash. All right. Here's the windows, and we're going to do the side windows first. So, cut the lower sash out. And the uppers.
Bill, I gather you put the glazing on last, do you not?
I'm going to do it right now.
Okay.
Glazing sheet. All the window sash bits have an adhesive backing. So peel that off. Take it. Drop it right over the appropriate bit. And normally I would put the lowers up on the sheet so that I can hang the uppers off the bottom. The glazing that I use has a tissue backing, thus the whiteness. We'll peel that off in just a minute. But always be sure that you stick your window frames, mullions, sash bits on the shiny side. If you stick it on the tissue side, it's grief from there, trust me. So I'll take the point of this tweezer and just kind of stick it underneath the tissue and pull it off. When the laser cuts the mylar, it sort of sticks the tissue to the window piece. And we actually want that. That way it stays in place. So now I'm going to add some glue to the out. Well, before I do that, I'm going to make sure it fits. Wow, how about that? It does. So I'm going to put a little glue on the outside edge on this here. Back, plenty of glue. There we go. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm left-handed and the camera's always on the wrong side. So there we go. Stuck that from the inside. We'll do this sash here. You know, if your forceps won't dig underneath it, take your blade and just get underneath that tissue to get it off. A little bit of glue on this. One of the advantages to our windows, I know there's two, is you can have your windows open if you wish. Right? So there we go. We got an open window, and sometimes it's kind of cool to take a window curtain or shade and have it flying out the window. So I'm not going to put these in right now. I'll do that off screen next week, about 10 minutes before the show. But we'll put the bigger ones in just so we can move on to that. We'll put a door in too. And basically the same thing. Keep whittling at it. Eventually that backing paper will come off. If it doesn't, just throw it in the bin and call me and I'll send you another set. I'll use a knife this time. What I really like about this is you've always got, as long as you're careful, a nice, clean, smudge-free window. So I'm going to take this one and test fit it in the opening, make sure it fits, and it does. And there you go. Let's do the other one too, because it looks pretty cool. So I put the window in, I always hold it from the top, and I'll take it and set it right down on top of the sill, and then push it into the opening from the back, so it's right tight against that frame, so that there's no gaps all around it. And there you go. And you notice I didn't put any glue on those when I put them in. I can add glue from the inside now, just to the sides. And then they're in, no problem. Yep, got a little smudge on that one, but hey, it's live TV. Put that back on. And that's got it. So we're gonna do one more thing tonight. I'll point out too, on this sheet, there's these two long, narrow windows. They will go on the inside for these guys. And then there's this window here. That is actually the transom window, which will go up here. And next week, magically, they will appear in the right spot. But in the meantime, we're gonna put the roof together. And it's 2 roof panels and a couple of supports. I'll just break these right out because they got a knob on them. It really doesn't matter that much. Actually, the nubs are annoying, so I'm going to cut it off. There we go. The roof is always 2 panels or more, and it's got the slots on the ends for the supports. And they're only going to go one way. So I'm going to slide this in right like that. Press it down, and I'm going to put the other one in dry, just test fitting these guys. Sometimes they can be fairly snug when they go into the slots. It just depends upon who was running the machine that day that actually made the paper or the MDF, because sometimes it can be a little bit thicker. It'll vary, so it'll be kind of tight to get them in there. So I'll lay in a bead of glue right along the edge where it fits in. And normally I would let it sit for 5 minutes so that glue will set up. But since we're live, I'm going to see if I can get it together without it falling apart. Ah, there, good. Add another bead. I'll do it on there, and I'll also add a bead right along the top edge here. Right? There we go. I love it when a plan comes together. All right, come on. There we go. All right. I'm going to add some more glue because falling apart just got glue where it didn't want to be. Okay. There we go. And that's going to be it for today.
You know, I like that glue because it reminds me of the soldering that I do in brass. Once I soldered it, it's there, period.
Yeah.
So that's neat. Anybody have any questions? Well, Bill, I thank you so much for being here. By the way, how's your large scale shay coming?
It's coming along. We just got the parts back from the laser cutter cutting the steel for the throttle and the Johnson bar. So we'll be hooking that up Friday, or at least getting them in place on Friday. So.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks so much. See you next week.
All right. Thank you.
And now I'd like to turn to Tom Farrell, who is our Scratchbuilding layout expert, who tonight is going to show us how great he is with his electronic skills. Tom, welcome.
You're muted, Dom. There we go. Now everybody can hear me. Well, thank you for the great introduction. And I'll try to live up to this. My last layout, some of you may be familiar with, the rustic buff and old Gothic ON30 railroad, was dismantled last July because I moved. And I downsized. But my layout room is probably twice as big, so I downsized intelligently. That was a joke. And the last layout was basically analog, and it was basically a rat's nest of wiring. So this time I'm switching to DCC, and I'm going all out with it. It's about as sophisticated a DCC as you can get. There's a picture of my old Gothic railroad, the last one. The new one promises to be even better. Phil, if you go to the next page. So the idea is I'm not really compromising on anything here. If any of you have seen the last 3 programs on my new layout, I'm just taking my time. And, when you build a railroad, theoretically, there's an order to things. And as I said before, on my last layout, I jumped all around from half the bench work to other bench work to backdrops to wiring, just all over the place. This time I'm trying to hold to be more methodical, and it's really proving to make a great difference. We go to the next slide. There aren't any slides. Bill. So I chose to go with Digitrax principally for the layout. I need a slide.
Yeah, Phil, you stop sharing.
Zoom is not cooperating. There we go. It didn't want to show up in the share first time.
Go to the next slide.
Yep.
And then the next slide. Don't make me have to do this myself. Okay. The first thing I started with was the control cabinet. Now I got a lot of my background on DCC from YouTube. The DCC guy, Phil Puckett, I guess his name is, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I started with a 3/8 inch piece of plywood that's approximately 2 foot by almost 4 foot. I sketched out on the left there, you see, I painted it white. Then I sketched out the location of my, the vents, the fan, where the terminal strips will go. And you can see in the middle there where I'm working on it, cut it out. And then on the right, it's installed. So I have fans up top. I have a vent down the bottom. And I have all those power strips across the middle there, top middle. We'll go to the next slide. That's the vent. You can open and close it down the bottom. It's just a heating, ventilation, air conditioning vent out of plastic from Lowe's. But it just makes it look. All right, here's the DCC schematic for the layout. Now it looks intimidating. And as I'll go through a series of slides here in a moment, it's really not as complicated as it looks. I know it looks like a wiring for a nuclear submarine, but it really isn't that difficult. Let's go to the next slide. If you break it down into components, the very first thing I did was purchase from Digitrax a 20 amp regulated power supply, bottom left-hand corner. And that feeds a DCC command center. And then from England, I purchased from DCC Concepts a alpha meter. It's a volt and amp meter. And how that works is you have to hook your power from the bus from your DCC to the amp meter and then to your track. If you don't do it that way, then you don't get an accurate draw on your track for amperage. So that's actually in between the bus from the DCC command center and your track. I did add from DCC Specialties circuit breakers with a 2 amp trip. You can have that go from 1 amp to 5 amps. I chose 2 amps. And I have 2 power districts, as you'll see. Power district A is right off the digital command center. And it feeds 2 districts. I'll take questions along the way here if anybody has any questions or comments. Anyone right now? You can unmute yourself. Okay. Then I'll show you the power district B. Go to the next slide. So sharing the 20 amp power supply is a booster. A booster is basically like a second command center. As I learned, it does not have the ability to program chips, your on board, but it feeds off of the same 20 amp power supply. Again, I have a meter in between my booster and the track. And then we go to additional circuit breakers up top there. And then I have 4 different, we'll call them districts, coming off the booster, the district B1 and then the 3 staging tracks. Additionally, for my staging, because if anybody remembers, my staging is actually hidden. I bought a Digitrax block, it says block, it's supposed to be block occupancy detector. So it will actually light up if those tracks are occupied. And so basically, you've got a single 20 amp regulated power supply feeding a digital command center and a booster, both going directly to volt amp meters, digital volt amp meters, which go directly to circuit breakers. The reason I put in circuit breakers is if you have a short on a track or some sort of derailment that your engine crosses and shorts out, you're not going to damage your encoders, your engine, or the very valuable booster or command center. We go to next slide. Next slide, please. One of the options with Digitrax is the ability on their universal panels that are, I have 10 universal panels across the entire layout. And you can optionally hook up a 15 volt power supply to the back of those. And when you plug in a throttle, it'll actually charge the throttle up. So even though I'm going to use wireless throttles, they're going to have batteries in them. I thought it'd be a good idea to have the ability to charge those wireless throttles at will with the 10 universal panels I have distributed across the layout. So that's a separate power supply. And if you'll notice, the colors on my drawing here aren't just for art's sake. That actually matches the colors on the layout, so it's easy to troubleshoot. And at a glance, I can tell whether it's the bus, the DC power for the charging unit, or as you'll see, the 12 volt accessory charging. Next, please. Oh, we're going real fast. Back one, please. I decided to put in a 12 volt transformer to power my tortoise machines or any accessories or LEDs or lighting I may have scattered around the layout. This is all pre-wired into the layout. It's really easy to wire this stuff in now without having crawl underneath the layout. I think we skipped a slide, but basically my command center and booster feed a wireless Digitrax radio. So my throttles are wireless. I have 2 of them at the moment. I have what's called a super throttle, which is gives you the ability to program your encoders. And then I have a less expensive, simpler throttle, the Digitrax UT6D. Anyway, it's just a smaller, more simple throttle. I envision having a bunch of those if I ever have a layout session, and just a couple of the more complicated throttles. Okay, now let's see if we go to the next slide. This is, you're going to quill to parchment here. This is the back of that control panel that I built. You can see all the red and blue are the bus wires for the layout, the DC bus wires. The orange and brown is the panel charging wires for the 10 plugins distributed along the layout. The yellow and green, those wires just run throughout the layout. If I need 12 volts for my tortoise machines, it's already in place. And then the black is the plug-in RJ12 cable. So if you look in the upper right, the RJ12 is very similar to the old style phone wires. The 12 volt accessories are green and yellow, just like my drawing. The DCC bus wires are twisted together. That's to eliminate any RFID or any fields generated by the waveform coming off the AC, basically the AC that rides atop that. it's a square wave. I don't want to get into it, but basically the square wave that runs across DC. And then there's my just DC throttle wires, the orange and brown. If you look at my photograph in the upper right hand, go back the other way. If you look at the upper right hand corner of the box, you'll see the Digitrax logo. That's that wireless unit. They recommend you put that in the central area of your layout so you get equal distribution in the room. I don't think it's a big problem. My room's only 35 feet, but this control box panel is basically located in the middle of the layout. Okay. Oh boy. First day with the new hands, Phil.
It's just really sensitive. It doesn't change and then it hits it again. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Just kidding. So these are the circuit breakers. They light up like a Christmas tree. I have everything connected to terminals inside the box and outside. So for troubleshooting purposes, or if I have to replace something, things aren't, quote, hardwired. It takes more time to do it this way, but at some point in the future, I think it's going to pay off, because if I have to replace one of these boards, it's not directly hardwired to the layout. There's terminals in between, and for troubleshooting purposes. So I actually have 7 circuit breakers. I had to add one up in the side. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the main photograph, you'll see that little one up there. I also designed this particular circuit breaker board to roll on rollers, door rollers. So this is actually sticking out of the the front of the control box for troubleshooting purposes. I don't have to stick my head in a box to unscrew anything or fix something. Next slide. Yeah, this is the front of the control box. You can see my array of, I'll show you exactly what those voltmeters are and what they do up there. You can see how the thing lights up really nice. I put a glass door on there like an old style stereo cabinet. You see in the first photograph, the middle is that sort of massive 20 amp power supply. To the left is the booster, to the left is the command center, to the right is the booster. Down the bottom is, let's go across the top here. I'll and then I have close-ups of these, but basically those are voltmeters in the first panel. The second panel is that Digitrax plug-in that I was referring to. They also have an LED in there. So my main line, let you know if you have power to your main line or wherever you hook it up to, but all of my 10 Digitrax plug-in panels are, the LED option on there is hooked up to the main line. So if I have juice to the main line, that LED's on. That little toggle switch to the left of that panel there is for the programming track that's on my layout. It's just a siding. It can be used as a main line, run with the DCC system, or if you flip the switch, it's isolated and it's a programming track. The light switch there is not a low grade 99-cent light switch. That's a 20 amp switch that turning it on and off turns all this stuff on and off. All my little transformers, my big 20 amp power pack, all this stuff. One flick, when I'm done playing with trains, I just flick it off and off everything goes. Okay. Next slide. This is a close-up of the back side of the layout. This isn't what you just looked at. So the bottom 3 are just close-ups of what you're seeing across the top. So that digital on the left there is a voltmeter and amp meter. I got that from England. It really only took a couple of weeks to get. There were 3 of them that I looked at, 2 in the States, and this one looked the cleanest and was competitively priced. And like I say, you have to hook this up in between your track, or you don't get the advantage of how many amps you're drawing off the layout. And then the green, I chose all different colors that make sense to me. This is a 12-volt accessory power supply, telling me that I do in fact have 12 volts for my tortoise machines and any LED lighting. And then this universal panel, this for the LocoNet system, has a built-in LED, has built-in charging if you use those options. I've got 10 of these across the layout. They're really easy to wire. And the way I designed the layout, I'll show you a little later, but I left this, I don't know, 4 or 5 inch gap between the fascia on the layout and my base cabinets that I built. And I can just insert all kinds of electronics, panels, and I think it looks pretty professional, you know. Next one.
I agree.
Pardon me?
I agree. I think it looks fantastic.
So here's the front of the layout. The right below this is that cabinet. So again, I've labeled everything. So the if you look at the enlargement photo on the bottom left, that voltmeter, and those voltmeters were $20 from a company called PowerX in California. So they're relatively inexpensive, but they look like something out of Star Trek. So I generously use them. That tells me that my 20 amp power supply is putting out 16.5 volts. So I know it's working. And I know when it runs through the digital command center or well, this happens to be the digital command center. On the other side of the layout's the booster. This tells me to the track, I have 14.6 volts going to the track at all time because it's DCC. You always have a voltage to the track. And I'm drawing 0.21 amps, even though there's nothing on the layout. So it must be all the other junk I have on the layout. The bottom right, the red numbers is telling me I have 14.7 volts going to that LocoNet charger, which you see on the right. So if you plug in one of my wireless throttles or a wired throttle and it has rechargeable batteries, and that light is on, I know that I have 14.7 volts going to that recharge. It was only $20. It looks like you cut a 1 1/8 inch hole. In fact, the drill bit costs more than the damn power, the analog digital display. And then the toggle switch there is for my programming track. I have 2 programming tracks, one on each side of the layout. In the run position, you're on the DCC bus. It has the center off. So if you want to place a locomotive on the programming track, you have it in the off position. Then you switch it up to program. Now you take your wireless throttle or your wired throttle that's capable of programming an encoder, and you don't have to encode. You don't have to program on the bench. I have 2 tracks on the layout that are basically sidings that have a dual function. They're either a siding or they're a programming track. Mm-hmm. And then moving across the top of the top photograph, there's that 20 amp industrial grade light switch, turns everything on and off. And then the 12 volt digital voltmeter that's telling me I have 12 volts accessories on a separate power supply from all the other stuff, giving me power for my tortoise machines.
Tom, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 programming tracks that you have,
mm-hmm.
they tie in directly to your layout, right?
Yeah, they're just like an industrial siding.
So when you have it on programming and you finish programming, can you just run the locomotive then just
right off, right on the layout? Yep.
And just keeps going.
Yep, it's just like you got it programmed, gave it an address, you switch it from, that's a toggle switch, center off, double pull, double throw toggle switch. You just go from program to off to run, and now you're on the main system.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yep. Next one. This is an overview of how that reason my layout's taking so long is I'm a cabinet maker, I guess, amongst my other skills. Not really, but I'm making all these cabinets below the layout. And you can see the integrated cabinet there lit up like a Christmas tree. That's my ECC system. And see those gaps in the upper, right below the fascia. When I'm done putting in my electronics, I'm going to put in white blank off boards just so the thing looks pretty, if you will. But for now, they're open because for example, as an afterthought, added that green 12 volt digital voltmeter there. And it was just the way I have this designed is I can keep adding things, and it looks integrated, looks well planned. But really, it's just flexibility and design. So I can just keep adding things. Like if I want to add a control panel for my tortoise machines, and I'm going to use those touch controls. Jim mentioned earlier, we're going to have that manufacturer on the program in March. I spoke to him personally 2 days ago about my layout because it's going to require a lot of his equipment. I just wanted to talk to him about it. But I will include where those gaps are below the fascia and my cabinet. I'll have a control panel in there, and it'll have those touch controls because I think they look cool, and they capacitive discharge. You'll see they're pretty neat stuff. And yeah, so I don't think there's any more slides. I think that's it. So if there's any question, oh yeah, there's okay. Any questions from anybody? Surely there's one.
I have a question.
Okay.
For the DC 12 volt, what did you use?
I bought from an electronics supply house. I bought a 12 volt power supply, and then I had to wire the 110 volts to it, and then I had to just run 2 wires off the 12 volt to it.
Okay.
And I mounted it to the inside wall of the my control cabinet, and yeah, it was like $20 or something like that.
It wasn't any special brand, was it?
No, it was just
okay.
I have it in the book. I could tell you what it is in 2 seconds if you want to know.
No, that's okay, but
yeah,
I know where to look.
Yeah, there, it's right behind me. You can't. Here, I'll get it. Hold on. It's just a make a liar out of me. Got everything so organized, but that's not in there. Well, I'll figure it out for next time. I'll have the name of it, but it was relatively inexpensive, $20 or so.
Thank you so very much. I mean, you've really covered a lot of material tonight, and obviously it's going to be a beautiful operation once you get it finished.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, now I want to go to Phil at home, who handles our local clubs and NMRA division segments for us. Phil, what do you got for us this evening?
This evening, I don't have a guest this evening. And what I'm going to do is spend just a couple of minutes talking about something we did in the Pacific Coast region that I think could be interesting for other regions to think about. And to talk about this, I actually put a little slide together, and I'll kind of talk about what we did and why. And I think it'll be kind of interesting as you think about recruiting. So this is focused purely on the concept of what do we do to do recruiting. So kind of a little bit of thought process about a region, and basically, how do you recruit and what do you need to do to recruit? So on the upper left, to take a prototypical not division, it's actually a region. This literally got created while we were talking here. So assume you have a regional membership of 800. So if you look at the attrition rate, and just to give a thought process here, if you assume that the average modeler stays in the NMRA for 30 years and ages out, you're at somewhere around 3% attrition just from aging out. If members leave for other reasons, they move to places or just decide not to be members anymore, a 5% or 7% annual attrition rate is not an unreasonable number to plan on. So if you look at that from the perspective of new members, how many new members do you need to generate every year to replace your attrition? So, it's somewhere, if you look at this model, between 24 and 56 for that 800 member region. And so this is just kind of the basics of basic mathematics of how stuff works out. So then you come down to the bottom and say, okay, how do people find out about you? Now, obviously, some people find out about you in terms of magazines where there's an NMRA ad, they find the NMRA, it's kind of random, but as a region, you have no control whatsoever over that. So if you think about where we can recruit and where we generally do recruit, we go to general train shows. We may go have a show. We've heard about Henry talked in his division about what they do as far as a show they run. You can go to hobby shops. You can go to local clubs. So I want to talk a little bit about why that's so interesting. We talk about the little model on the right. And then the second question, this is the question we really got into in the Pacific Coast region, was how much should we spend on recruiting? As we had a long conversation and we concluded the budget, and I think it was about $1,200, $1,000 for recruiting for 2023. So the perspective is, say, if you budget at $3 a member for all of the things you do, your budget's $2,400. If you say I should spend half my budget on recruiting, that's $1,200. So the question is, how do you spend that $1,200? So the little model on the right, I wrote a book, if you're interested, it's called Napkin Logic. It's up on Amazon. It's pretty highly rated, but it's a set of different business concepts. And one of the business concepts is this idea of how customers become customers. So the idea is, there's a universe of unknown suspects, of people who could buy your product or your service or whatever, or in this case, who might want to join the NMRA. And so then what you do is you've got to go from that universe of known suspects to known or identified suspects. So this is when you know who that person is. They've raised their hand. They've said, hi, I'm interested in talking to you about your product, what you do, etc. Generally, by the way, that's called lead generation. Once you have a lead and someone has said expressed interest, now there really are two more steps you have to go through. And I didn't draw this up. And again, if you're interested, there's a chapter in the book about this in great detail. But basically, to go from known suspects to qualified prospects, the best way to think about that is you have to disqualify the people that are not going to buy from you. So, if your product, if you're selling a Mercedes-Benz that costs $70,000 and a 16-year-old kid shows up and expresses great interest, you might want to qualify that they're going to be able to afford to buy that car. So with that kind of as a thought process, you've got to get down to qualified prospects, and then you've got to sell to them to become customers. So if we think about this again from a recruiting perspective, because if you think about these things in the right way, you can actually think about how you want to put the steps in. So when we go to a train show, there are a whole bunch of people there, and that is our universe of unknown suspects. We don't know any of them. At the show, we may have, a booth, a table. People come up, we talk to them, and hopefully out of that, we're going to get some known suspects or qualified prospects. But the reality is, what I tend to find when I've talked to regions, divisions about what they do, is they tend to talk to people, give them some information, say, check us out, and the people wander away. So from the perspective of selling to those people, unless you know them and identify them, you've lost them. And that's a basic axiom of selling. So if we think about it, what we want to do at the trade show is we want to try to move all the way at the train show to being customers. So how do we do that? So the first thing we have to do is we have to disqualify the known suspects that really don't have a potential to be NMRA members. Now, clearly, young family walks up with 2 kids, you know, they're probably pretty interesting to disqualify. But on the other hand, if somebody walks up who's, you know, 45, 50, is interested, you've got to figure out, do you want to talk to them? So the question you always want to ask is, are you a model railroader? It's a pretty basic question. The answer to that is a qualifier question. Oh, yes, I am, et cetera, et cetera. So now the next question then becomes, if they're a qualified prospect, they have to be somebody you can sell to. Well, there's actually a disqualifier that's really interesting, because if somebody's already an NMRA member, I don't need to sell to them. So the second question you always ask is, are you an NMRA member? If the answer to that is yes, you say, great, thank you for being a member, you know, et cetera, talk to them, you know, do just socialize, et cetera. But the answer is no. Now you have the opportunity to sell. And so one of the things to think about is, what's the next line you use? And quite frankly, the next line I always use is, why not? It's the best deal in model railroading, et cetera, et cetera. So now you go into the sales campaign of why you want to be a part of it. In the case of the event we just did, we did a great train show last weekend in Sacramento. Actually, not this past weekend, but the weekend before that. We had a table. The table was donated by the organizer of the event. So what we were doing there was basically meeting the people that were there and bringing them in and qualifying. But then the question that we began to ask is, what do we want to do to try to get people to close at the event? To do that, we actually have 2 things. The first thing is we planned an event 2 weeks after the train show, which in this case was done by the Sierra Division, which is up there where the train show is running. Dave Putnam, who was on this little program a couple of weeks ago, ran that and set that up. What they did was they set up for this Saturday going to the California State Railroad Museum and having a guided tour of the NMRA exhibit there by the guy who basically curated it. So that's Charlie Getz. So that's a great thing to encourage people to want to do. And basically the comment was, well, you can come do that with us, whether you want to join or not. But, and this is where we did something that I think is a really interesting thought process. And as I say this, I want you to look at the bottom left at that $1,200 for recruiting. Because how do you spend $1,200 in recruiting and lead generation, but you can use it to close? So if you're a salesman, you want to close, and what's the best way to close someone is to have something that they have to do today. So basically what we told people is, we said, look, have you heard about the Rail Pass? The Rail Pass is $19.95. It's a great deal. It's something you get 9 months of membership. You get to try it out. You're going to get to come to the event in Sacramento on Saturday. And today, if you sign up today, we'll pay $10 of it from the region. And the result of that is we signed up 19 members at that train, 19 new members of that train show. And so I want you to look at those. The reason I think this is a really interesting thought process is, go look at those new member numbers and that $1,200. Instead of thinking about spending the $1,200 on marketing and buying a bigger banner and all that, take half of the $1,200 and make it $10 memberships to get people to buy a Rail Pass. That's 60 new members for your $10. So I'll kind of leave it at that. And open up if there's any questions or comments. I'll stop sharing. But to my mind, I think we stumbled into something really interesting. I think it's a combination of 3 things that can make this show recruiting much more effective. The first is to make sure you have a strategy at the show to engage with the public to figure out who you want to sell to. The second thing is to have something fairly quickly after the show that becomes an enticement for people to want to join, because it's something they're going to want to do. It's not abstract of, you like the events we do, but we're going to do this great event. And then the third thing is to have a closing motivator that says that you get a benefit today that you lose if you don't do it today. Anyway, that was the clubs and divisions for today. I hope that was interesting. Any questions, comments, thoughts, inputs?
I think it's a novel approach. I haven't heard anybody use that approach. I've heard of one reason it pays the whole $20, but I think your approach is much better because the model at least has some skin in the game in your way.
And you got it, Jim. I'm all about skin in the game. So you give somebody something for free, the value is zero.
Exactly.
You say, I'll do it 50-50 with you. Now we're in it together, and it's we both have skin in the game. I have skin in the game. Plus, the other thing that's beautiful about this, that's really cool is who has all the membership apps?
Yeah.
I do, because
Yeah.
Dave gave them to me. So they're all getting emails immediately from us. We're not waiting the 3 months till we get them on the list from National to go engage them, get them started, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's and I won't say there's any brilliant foresight and planning here. It's almost always serendipity, and you stumble onto stuff that sounds good. But I think it worked. And like I said, my feeling is if we could do a train show in each of our divisions like that and have similar success, we will 100% wipe out our attrition rates that we've had over COVID.
Sounds like a winner. Congratulations.
Anyway, enough said. So I will leave with that and throw it back to you, Jim.
Okay. Is Steve Sherrill here this evening? I've looked on the thing. I haven't seen his name, but there's some people that I haven't recognized. I'm just trying to find out if he's here.
I don't think so.
Evidently not. Next, I want to introduce a young man that I am really impressed with, Mike Davis. I met Mike because of Mark Pogendorf had him on the hobby show segment that he did. And I was so impressed with Mike that I called him up and I said, look, how about coming on the show periodically and talking about the young modeler and his viewpoint and what he wants out of the hobby, and try to bring some perspective to the show so that we kind of understand what the younger generation is trying to look for. I think a lot of us on the show are really curious to find out, because we keep hearing, how are we going to get young people involved in the hobby? Where are the young people? And then you don't hear anybody say, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. So I'm hoping that by having Mike on periodically, that maybe we can try to figure out and maybe have more young people join our show. So Mike, welcome. I really appreciate you doing this.
Hey, Jim, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jim. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I frequently hear a lot among modeling circles. One of the biggest lines I've heard on repeat almost nonstop is the hobby is dying. And that's been a line in the hobby for, I'd say, the past 30 years, 40 years. I've read Model Railroader magazine issues from the 1980s that had the same, like, the hobby's got to be dead in 20 years. Well, 40 years later, it's still kicking and very much alive. I mean, you wouldn't see manufacturers cranking out all the cool stuff.
As you're talking.
What?
No, go ahead. Somebody doesn't have their
Okay.
Jim, it's Steve Sherrill.
Oh, hi, Steve. How are you? Listen, let me. I didn't know whether you were on the show or not, but I'll come back to you right after Mike then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Basically, my argument is you wouldn't see all these manufacturers cranking out a lot of really cool, neat, new stuff if the hobby was dying. No one's sinking the kind of money into manufacturing that they do for something that's not going to be around in 10 or 20 years. They just wouldn't. I think the principal reason a lot of the older generation thinks that the hobby is dying is because when you go to a train show, the age demographic, or in clubs, the age demographic you see tends to skew very much older than younger. And also the things that they're typically interested in, not as many new people are getting interested in. That's my opinion as to why people seem to think the hobby is dying. They just don't see as much. They only see old people around. I argue that the young people are there. They're just usually not as visible or not as able to participate. And part of what I want to do in this show is sort of illustrate to a lot of people in the older demographic, why that might be. But not only that, I also want to touch on topics that are relevant to younger crowd. Talk about, what the older crowd could do to be more receptive to the younger crowd. And on days where I might not have a subject specific to the younger crowd, I plan to just be a younger face on the channel and maybe present the topic for modeling interest. Like, hey, here's a cool, neat short line railroad that might be of interest to people old and young, or here's something I did, model railroad wise that you could do. Like, I have an idea for one day showing how I built and painted a scale model house without all the fancy tools that some of us might have, because people in my age group might not have the space, money, or ability to have like a spray booth and a sanding booth and all the fancy gadgets that some of the older guys do. That's some examples. But at least for today, I just mainly want to introduce myself and sort of set the stage for what's going to be coming forward. I got another thing I will say in a minute, but for next time, which will be next time I plan on being on, will be in about 3 months. I want a lot of you to think about like what's some questions you've had for the younger crowd that you've always wanted to ask, but never had a chance to talk about, or really just never had a chance to go, hey, why do you think X? So next time it'll be a sort of a Q&A session as to why, what's a burning question you wanted to ask a younger modeler that you haven't had a chance to. Matter of fact, I think I got a couple minutes now. So what's a question that somebody has had that they want to know?
What's your favorite era?
I'm sorry?
Huh?
What's his favorite era, Mike? What's your favorite era?
I don't have just one, but if I had to pick one era, I would say 1980 Southern Pacific. However, I also have a huge interest in logging and narrow gauge. Yes, HON3. I'm an HON3 guy that's under the age of 50. They do exist. I actually know a couple other guys who are HON3 guys who are under the age of 50. And yes, we're also tired of being asked, is it N scale?
I just have a question. I have a question for you. What is it that you think should be out there for the younger guys that isn't?
It's not just one thing that I think is not out there that the younger guys want, but something that you receive a lot more support to attract the younger guys would be a lot more emphasis on more modern equipment like Amtrak or GEVOs. What I've noticed when I talk to people as far as what they're into modeling, it tends to be what they remember in their formative years between, I'd say, the ages of 10 and 25. And for a lot of people in the age group of most of the gentlemen I see on the channel right now, that tends to be a lot of transition era or Gen 1 diesels or, very early stuff. In my age bracket, we're into my age bracket's formative years is like post mega mergers of the 90s. We're used to seeing patch jobs. We're used to seeing like pretty much all the railroads evolve into Union Pacific, BNSF, CSX, Amtrak, short lines, regionals. Yep. That's what we're used to seeing in our formative years. My case is a bit different, that I didn't have a functioning railroad in my backyard for that good chunk of that time. So my interest came from a lot of history books that I read, which is how I got into logging and narrow gauge and 80 Southern Pacific, because that's what I read.
Yeah, so I would agree with you, and the thing that I'm doing is I'm trying to keep my railway fairly modern, like with the newest style locomotives and all that kind of stuff, railway cars. So what it means is you're running longer stock, which means you have to have wider radius, and that may be a little hard to do in some for a teenager, because he's got to kind of live with his parents and that kind of stuff. But you know what? I really enjoy the modern era stuff, and because exactly for the same reason, that's what's out there. That's what we're seeing, and and so the other side of me is that if you want to model that, you better get out there to trackside, keep your safe distance, and get some good shots of what's going by, and that really helps. I think it's really encouraging.
mind you, what I said is more of a generalization. There are definitely a lot of exceptions to the rule. I know plenty of old guys who model new stuff, and I know plenty of young guys who model old stuff. But overarching, it's people tend to model what they remember their formative years. I know plenty of guys who, read something in a history book one time and were like, that's really cool. I want to model that. Like there's a guy near me who models, I think it's called the Central New England. No, the Vermont, some East Coast railroad, but I don't think he's actually lived there. He just really likes it from a history book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing I'd ask is, do you like the models that are currently out there where they're basically ready to run, beautifully detailed, not thinking like Rapido and those kind of guys? And like the other thing that's come to market in the last, 5-6 years is complete build-ups. And where you don't paint it yourself, it's all done, the whole bit. The thing that I see about that is when you do the cost analysis, it's actually cheaper to buy a build-up than to buy all the paints, do it all yourself, and the whole schmoz. So, I know there's advantage. I just want to know what the young guys think about that.
A lot of the young guys, I think, really like the ready to roll and put out of the box and sticking on the layout stuff. Not some of it's out of laziness. I'm personally I'm a lazy guy. I will not. I'll be honest, I'm lazy when it comes to this stuff. I don't want to spend all day building a Craftsman kit and, a brass locomotive puzzle, as someone puts it, is not exactly my idea of a good time. It's actually my idea of the third circle of hell. But I think some of it's laziness, which nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of it is some of the young guys just don't have the kind of time and energy that older crowds would to sit down there and build a kit or weather a car. They just want to be able to take it out of the box, stick it on tracks, and watch it run.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. The other thing too that's come along, and this particular group is basically Craftsman scratch build and Craftsman kits. But there's an awful lot of really good plastic kits out there that don't take as long to do, and you paint them up properly and they look pretty good. And so we see that, and the plastic kits are good quality now, and they tend to be less expensive than the wood laser cut kits. What do you think about that?
Eye of the beholder. I mean, if you like it, you buy it. No what? It's the same thing I say whenever I hear someone complaining about a manufacturer putting out an item they don't like. It's like, if you like it, buy it. If you don't like it, nobody's forcing you to buy it. You can just ignore it and, let the other guy enjoy it. I know a couple guys have given me all kinds of teasing and prodding for me buying a freelance locomotive that never existed. If I'm like, I enjoy it, I have fun with it, leave me alone.
What about the electronic side of the hobby?
The young guys really like the electronic end of it, especially being able to link their phone to their DCC system and control it off that. I think the biggest advantage of that is one less device I can lose, one less device I have to keep track of. Me personally, I mean, whenever I go to club functions, I prefer one old. I go old school when it comes to DCC throttles. I don't really like using the phone. I've never really used the phone, and I just not a fan of it. I mean, I never tried it, but it doesn't really appeal to me. I prefer good old-fashioned DCC throttle. But I know lots of young guys who love to be able to connect with their phone and run a train that way. And like I said, dealer's choice. If you like it, you like it.
Ray, I would love to be able to find manufacturers with these plastic kits. I've heard other people say what you said earlier. I haven't been able to find one to come on the show. If you can put me in contact or suggest a plastic kit manufacturer that I can call, I'll be glad to call them and invite them to come on the show and show how their kits can be used for model railroaders. I'd love to be able to do that.
I might just add something there on the kits. As far as the overwhelming amount of plastic kits out there, the biggest ones seem to be Walters and Cornerstone for HO and somewhat for N. And there is a ton of beautiful laser cut kits, wood laser cut kits out in the market. But again, they're a little more pricey. But Walters is probably, Walters Cornerstone is probably the biggest supplier of plastic kits.
Plastic, I will find out. Thank you so much. Mike,
Okay,
thanks so much for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it, and I'll look forward to you back in June. I think we've got you scheduled for.
Yeah, I think that's the case. One of the topics I will touch upon at a later date is about the young guys simply not having the kind of free time that a lot of the older crowd does to do model railroading. And as much as I would love to do a more frequent showing, I personally don't feel I have the bandwidth for more than once a quarter, because I'm only 26 and I got a lot going on.
I can't thank you enough. I think this is going to be a real eye-opener for a lot of us, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, Jim, and I will be in touch with you. I will be in touch with you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks so much, Mike. Okay. All right, next person I want to introduce you to is Steve Sherrill. And Steve is going to talk to us about his OM30 Lazy Susan layout. Steve, welcome.
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. Now that I'm identified, name on the iPad is my wife's name and not me, so I don't know how that happened, but
I looked for you and couldn't find you, and that's why I made the general statement that I made. I figured if you were there under some other name, you might speak up, which you did. So I'm glad we got together.
Yes, well, I've been running trains now for 75 years, so I've been through a lot of different things as far as the evolutions. And right now I have a 24 by 32 completed ON30 railroad in a separate building. I've started building these little micro or small layouts just as a kind of a little knack. Larry Knapp kind of got me involved in this and interested. So I've got one here that I wanted to introduce some new things that you don't see very often in American railroad. You see a lot of it in European models because they're used to having smaller spaces, and so they have to improvise. One of the things is sector plates. Sector plates replace a lot of switches. They're just actually movable sections of track. And so on this particular layout, which is 21 by 40 inches, I have two re-railers that I've used as sector plates. And I kind of got, I noticed these in an old Atlas catalog in a layout book. They've had a turntable, which they made with a 9-inch section of track, and they put a nail in it. Well, nobody ever did that, so that was no good. But what I did with this was the same concept, except I put a rail spike at the end so you get the movement. Bob Gelmacher is a friend of mine. He made a little device that goes in between the tracks and extends out, and I put a little knob on the end of it so that I could move it. I have stops so that the track does not go too far. It stays aligned with nothing more than spikes. Now, this layout has an 8-inch radius curve, which definitely limits what you can do. If you look at most of these micro layouts, and most layouts in particular, you only see one side of the layout. And I said, that's a shame because we have a tendency to actually model things that we don't see, the backs of buildings and things like that. And so what I wanted to do was to create something that actually allowed you to use both sides of a layout. And so this being a small layout, limited number of cars, it's got 3 switches, two sector plates and 1 stub switch, which I made out of a Atlas snap switch. It's very simple. And I will show that in this operation, which I get to sort cars and I move around to the other side, you can see that by having it on a Lazy Susan, I can turn this and we have an entire other railroad here. And because this locomotive runs so slow and nice, I've got it around the locomotive that's just now coming around the corner onto the new part of the railroad, which I'm going to switch into a little freight station and a tipple. So because it's a small layout, there's not much room, you have to use really small buildings. And so what I actually did was I used HO buildings, and this is an HO plastic mill. And so what I wanted to do with this was to also make it easy for people who are just starting out to realize that they don't have to get the real expensive kits. They can modify some of the other cheaper plastic build kits and still be acceptable. And this would be an introduction into a later development. So the layout is just created like we use the other things that we use. The styrofoam for bases. This is on a 2-inch piece of styrofoam with cabinet backer for support. A 12-inch Lazy Susan from Walmart, and this type of wheel that goes underneath. It's a ball bearing type of wheel, and they cost like $1. So there's 4 of those, and it all balances. You can see there's hardly any play, and it spins very nicely. It also gives you a look where you can see it, and I'll turn this toward the camera. You now get to see a different view of a layout. I get to see this north and south. It's running toward me and away from me. And I also get to see both sides of the layout. So it's a whole different concept, and I haven't seen this. And I believe me, I've looked at a lot of YouTubes. But it's something really kind of neat as far as not being large, but being able to utilize both sides. And here's my stub switch I made. I might be able to demonstrate that at a later date, show how I made that. It's very simple. And since these old switches are really cheap at train shows, you know, we can pick those up for sometimes $2 or $3, and it's easy to just modify one. And instead of a 9-inch section, you knock it down to 3 inches, and very compact. And you know, all my switches are thrown with the ground throws, the caboose into ground throws. And it's just straight HO code 100 track, held together with spikes. But the 8-inch radius really limits the size of what you have here. Bob Gelmacher made all these 3D cars, and I go to a train show and I will buy used or old HO box cars that have sprung trucks for $2 or $3, take the trucks off, and the couplers, and transfer them onto these. So it's an inexpensive way of having the hobby and not breaking the bank.
I think it's a unique concept. I really do appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us about it, Steve, because I've never heard anybody have one of these.
Well, you have, I'm telling you, you have to sit down and operate this to realize how much fun it is with 2 or 3 cars. There's so much operation here. You really can't get the whole grasp of it unless you're down here running it. And you have to have a nice locomotive that runs nice and slow so that you can just turn it, you know, and I'm not turning it fast. I'm not trying to beat the locomotive. And it turns so easy on that Lazy Susan.
What kind of locomotive do you have there?
That's just a Bachman Davenport. And it's got, now this is, I'm battery powered. So, you know, I'm 100% battery powered on my both layouts. So I have no wiring issues at all. I think I've got 19 or 20 battery powered locomotives now. And I'm very satisfied. Each one has their own controller. Right now I'm into RC car batteries to move the trains. And they're only like $20 for the whole set to do this. So this could be as inexpensive as you want to make it, or you can go, you know, expensive and have a lot of electronics. I choose to not do that. I've been in there already, and I just think it's simpler is much better.
Does anybody have any questions about this for Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I think I missed something about the 8-inch radius curves. Is that flex track or are they section tracks?
No, it's flex.
Okay.
It's all flex. It's 3-foot section, Atlas Code 100. Okay. 3 switches. Even the what I use for sector plates is nothing but the re-railers, because I use HO trucks underneath these cars. It's very difficult to re-rail them should they come off, of course, which never happens. But you have a re-railer right here, and you re-railing it. It's a part of the layout.
It's all a great concept, especially the stub switches. I've done a few sub switches like that with old Atlas turnouts, and it is a lot of fun. I will attest to that.
Well, I've got another one that I'm building that won't have, well, I can put a Lazy Susan under it, but it's got no switches. And yet I'll be able, I made a turntable out of a DVD, out of a disc or DVD. So that's kind of unique too. And I'll show that one day too. But this, you can't even tell, this is the only O-scale structure on the whole thing. Everything else is HO. You can't tell because in the perspective is everything is smaller, but it's still 1/4 inch, you know? And like, I have the, this is what I call a good enough switch stand. It's made with a push pin that I've ground down and just a punch on a piece of red paper. And so it's good enough. It'll stand in place until I get something better. And I do a lot of that kind of thing. You know, the trees, most of the trees are commercial, but I've got all the foam and the what you see covering the ground. It just, I went to a sale and for $1 a pack, I got these. You know, it's out there if you want to be conservative with your funds.
Steve,
do it. Steve, if I wanted to build that layout, how much money should I have as a budget, do you think? Can I build that for $100?
Yes.
Engine and everything?
No. No, you can't build the engine. I mean, the engine, right now, those engines are skyrocketing. They're like $150, you know?
Yeah.
Steve, what brand of radio control you're using?
This is Deltang. It's an English, made in England. Huh. And it runs with 3.7 volts. It's got, I think this one got 600 milliamps in it. and it'll run for 2 or 3 hours. It does not have sound. It won't support sound. I've found out over the years that's all sound does for me and the people that I operate with. It just makes noise. And if I have somebody I'm next to, I can't talk over it most of the time. And so my group had just said, sound is out. We don't want sound. I do have some equipment with sounds. If somebody comes over, I will turn it on. Otherwise, there's no sound.
It's good to see an emphasis on how much fun you can have if you don't get too compulsive about everything in this hobby that is supposed to be right. You know, HO buildings with O-scale buildings, it works for you. It's more fun than being compulsively chasing something, especially for a little tabletop like that.
I was sitting in my building one day and I said, you know, I was losing interest. And I said, it was on a Thursday. And I said, you know, I just need to go in a little different direction. I said, I want to sell all my cars, all my standard length cars, even though they were narrow gauge, there was the standard Bachmann cars. And I had 81 cars. And I made one phone call and sold all 81. And then I started with the shorties, all the 3D prints and things like that. And I had to kit bash and create things. And so it's got me inspired again. You know, I've been in here, been in O&30 for years. And so it's just like everything is kit bash now. From HO, we make some, you know, put bigger parts on it, and the mechanisms are good. And also, I've used some of these old mechanisms from the 70s that had brass wheels. Well, you don't have to worry about any dirt on them with battery power, you know. But the good thing about battery power is you actually have to control the locomotive. You have to make it go faster. You have to make it go slower. You have to be aware of the load behind the engine, pushing it down a hill. The weight going up the hill. I mean, you're actually in complete control of that locomotive. It's not an electronic thing that runs itself. So are there any questions of, you know?
Steve, Larry McDonald up here in Canada. Do you charge through the rails or you take them off?
Nope.
To charge them?
All the batteries are taken out. It's very simple. What I've found is it makes it so much simpler to take it away from the board. In other words, when it comes around here, I'll take the top off and you can see what's involved here. I also have a lot of the radio control equipment in any gondola or some other car behind the locomotive. And so it's just a matter of unhooking that car and charging it through a connection on the car. So if we look at this, if you can see, here's the battery. Okay. I don't know, can you see that?
No, I can't.
No.
Can you see the green light? Can you see the green light, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, that shows that it's bound up.
Okay.
All right. And here, here's how big that is. That's the entire length. What makes this go is right here. Where? Put it right there, right there. See how long that is?
Yeah.
That's 2 wires to the motor, 2 wires to the battery, and I have movement. Okay?
Right.
Now that's for this kind. But all battery control basically It's 2 wire to the motor, 2 wire to the battery. After that, you can do whatever you want as far as how you want to charge it and the size of battery that you want. If it's supported by the receiver.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm missing something. Where's the receiver? Right by
Right
the,
here.
right by the motor. Okay.
This is the receiver. It's this long. It's less than it's about a ½ inch long.
Yeah, I never seen one that small.
Oh, this small.
And that, what's the make of the receivers?
Deltang.
Deltang. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll uncover it for you. Can you see it? Can you see it, Mark?
Come up a little bit.
Yep.
And right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's and that's when that light is on, it's bound. Huh.
I haven't seen one that small. Wow.
Well, that's about as small as they get. And that'll support 1 amp. All right. So some of them I could put 7.4 volts through this, but why? It's not going to make it any. All it does is give more power and makes it go faster, and use battery more. So by controlling the amount of voltage, you control the speed amount, and by putting more milliamps in, you get longevity.
Thank you.
This is the transmitters.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I'd never realized until you said it, Steve, is that using battery power really does put you in a much more the same position as a real engineer running that crane rather than turning the on-off switch on a transformer.
Yes, it does. It also, you know, you can't make it go in reverse. You can't reverse direction until you have to take all the power away from it. So you know how in DCC, I believe it's the same way. But in DC, you can reverse it and strip the gears, type of thing. So you don't put nearly the amount of stress on the gearing, and it's just wonderful. I mean, I knew for a long time. We had this in G scale in the 80s, and when I saw that, I knew that that's what I wanted. But it took it a while before it got small enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Anybody else have questions for Steve?
Steve, will you have this at Harrisburg show in June?
Yes.
Great. See you there. Thank you.
I'll have this one there. It also I also run all my accessories off of batteries, including the switch machines that I have. You know, I don't rely on electric power for anything. It's just much easier to do it that way. And you'd be surprised, like for a water fill or something like that, if you put a 9-volt battery on it, it'll last you 3 years. You know, the Morse code in the stations, you know, they just last forever. I mean,
yeah,
it's unbelievable how long these things last.
Well, listen, if you would like to, I'd love for you to come back and show us how to make one of those stub switches. That's fascinating to me. So
Well,
if you'd be willing to do that, I'll give you a call and we'll set up a time.
Okay.
That's
I can
great.
do that. I've actually got some other things I could throw in there at the same time. The stub switch won't take but 2 minutes.
That's
You know?
fine. That's fine. And we'll throw those in there too.
You know, but I can show you the next micro layout I'm making. It's kind of neat. And it's only 21 inches long. So you carry that around like a booklet, you know?
Yeah. Steve, thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be in touch with you.
Okay. I want to thank my neighbor too for being my cameraman.
He did a great job. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Thanks so
All right,
much.
bye.
Yes, sir. Well, that's our show for tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Most importantly, I hope you've learned something. And let me close it by something that I think you're going to find interesting that we call the caboose. We thought that would be a great bridge to model and a great learning experience trying to duplicate the kind of rust, the different kinds of rust that you saw on that bridge. So for tonight, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. As I say, I hope you learned something. That's the most important part of it. But I do hope you enjoyed yourself. We'll see you next week. And until then, happy modeling.